Hey, what's up, y'all? Today I want to talk to you about the pressures that come with being like a high IQ person. So my IQ is 142 per Stanford Binet, and it's something I didn't find out until after my educational years. I was kind of always an underachiever academically, and so it wasn't really anything that was spotted by like any of my educators. Um, I mean, my parents always knew I was bright, but they didn't really know I was, gifted or whatever. And for those who don't know, like, I'm not proclaiming to be a genius, but the threshold from an IQ perspective of being a genius is about 140. Like there's never been an IQ, a genius with an IQ of less than 140, according to most experts. Um, so anyway, the stressors and the pressure that comes with being high IQ is that, first of all, everybody always wants to like they think you're like an anomaly or something like so they want to ask you like all kinds of crazy questions like you think differently or whatever. And honestly, like so you can run into some issues with really high IQ people. So and fortunately, I feel like myself, like I didn't have some of those limitations. So what'll happen a lot of times, you'll have like someone who's like really really smart in certain areas, but they have like a lot of blind spots. Einstein had these. They say you couldn't drive a car, and he would get lost just walking home from his office or whatever. So a lot of times you'll see that high IQ people have a lot of blind spots. Personally, I mean, I feel like I have some of those, but not to that degree. Um, so that's a big thing. But anyway, so like being high IQ, everybody's always wanting to ask you like, well, hey, how do you look at this, or how do you think this, or what do you think about this? I mean, so it's like almost like you're an encyclopedia or something, and people want to constantly extract information from you, and that's fine. There's not a problem with that. But um, I think that the stigma or the stereotype is that you know let's just be honest when we're talking about people with high IQ is just like a gauge of how to measure intelligence. It's the best working model that we have and able to um, gauge or rate intelligence on a numerical system that people can comprehend. But it's important to also understand like even like the most like if you take into consideration like the lowest IQ person and the highest IQ person, like certainly those people would have a hard time communicating with each other because there would be such an intellectual gap. But not really, you know what I mean? As long as there wasn't any sort of like mental handicap, mental retardation, or something along among the low IQ person, like they could still formulate a conversation, still relatively um, not have a problem. For instance, one of my good buddies in high school, I mean, his IQ is probably 80, and that might be being nice. I mean, it could very well be in the 70s. It could be in the low 70s, and it wouldn't surprise me if it was even below 70. And for those of you who don't know, 70 is kind of that threshold for mental handicap. So, and we have no problems communicating. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be able to have any kind of philosophical discussions with him, or any kind of like abstract discussions with him, or even any kind of complex like theoretical discussions with him, or anything like that. He's just not going to get those things. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that again, so we're gauging on a human scale, but if we really want to think about intellectual intelligence. It's an infinite matter. Just humans are finite in their intelligence. So again, like if you have a 100 IQ person, which is about average, and you're talking to someone who's 120 IQ, there's not going to be a whole lot of differences there. Like you're going to notice the difference when you get into theoretical way, and I don't even think you'll really notice the differences necessarily academically. You might like really gifted people can Chris Langan's a good example. Guy got hung over and slept through half of his SAT or ACT, I can't remember which one, and then aced it after taking a nap with a hangover. So, I mean, certainly the super high IQ people can figure out problems really easy. But like if you're just having a like, and anyway, so my point is back to the matter. Like, if you were just to have a discussion with me, like you might think, and we were specifically if we got into like any kind of intellectual discussion, you would be like, this guy's a fairly smart guy. But if we were just hanging out at the bar, drinking or whatever, like you wouldn't think that my IQ was high. So anyway, like the stressors that come once people know that, like typically I don't ever tell anybody that I'm, And it was really on a whim that I went and got my IQ tested. Like a friend of mine had got his tested, and I didn't really feel like he was that intelligent, and his IQ was pretty high. And so it just kind of made me, I was like, wow, I mean, is this guy smarter than I am? Or, so, because I had just probably, I'd always assumed that my IQ was probably like around 115 or 110 or something like that. I'd never known. So, anyway, so that's just a little brief discussion about IQ and the pressures that come with being a high IQ person, and why most high IQ people, they tend to like not divulge that information. So that's probably the reason why. So anyway, y'all have a good day.